the closing of a long-running general store, and the rebirth of a fire station. That's next on Paths to the Present. Hi, I'm Gail Street, and welcome to Paths to the Present. This show is all about new uses for old buildings. We begin in Silver Spring at the site of Montgomery County's first fire station. Now over 100 years old, this building was revamped to serve Silver Spring in an entirely new way. Then it's on to the closing of Poole's General Store off River Road in Seneca. We'll revisit an earlier interview with store owner Raymond Poole and tell you about the store's future. But first, let's do the history quiz. This brown glass bottle dating to the 19th century had a very specific purpose. These ridges found on each side were meant to alert its handler to what it contained. Think you know what used to be inside this bottle? Stay tuned. I'll give you the answer at the end of the show. Organized firefighting began in Silver Spring in 1915 when the community's post office burnt down. Soon after, concerned citizens banded together to form the Silver Spring Bucket Brigade. 3 years later, the group formally incorporated, creating the Silver Spring Volunteer Fire Department. Not long after that, they moved into their first fire station. And that's the subject of our success story today. In 2007, the fate of the original Silver Spring Fire Station on Georgia Avenue was unclear. This century-old building had been replaced by a brand new state-of-the-art station across the street. Fortunately, Jeremy Gruber came forward to breathe new life into the old building, which had been special to so many for so long. And it turns out Jeremy was one of them.
My first job out of college was working for the Silver Spring Fire Department as a firefighter and a paramedic, and I was lucky enough to work in this station as a firefighter and a paramedic over my 20-year career with Montgomery County Fire Rescue Services.
So when the building came up for sale, Jeremy put in a bid to turn it into a restaurant. His connection to its past was an advantage.
The department itself had already thought of potentially putting something like into this space years before, and now to see that they had a legitimate bidder who had an actual past history with the building and had the wherewithal to be able to pull it off was very intriguing to the Silver Spring Fire Department.
Teaming up with Michael Mountain, a firefighter who had worked many years in the restaurant business, Jeremy set to work. It took 3 years of planning and another year of actual construction to transform the old fire station into Fire Station 1 Restaurant and Brewing Company. Jeremy described what it looked like when he took possession.
It looked like the firehouse I worked at over the years before. It didn't look much different. It still had all the presence of the fire station, just with no one being here. But it needed a lot of care and a lot of work just to maintain it, because the building was 100 years old.
This wasn't the first reuse for this building. It was constructed in 1910 as the first Silver Spring National Guard Armory, where Company K, 115th Infantry Division, was headquartered. As you can see, originally it looked more like a fortress, which is how armories were built at the time. Soon after the Silver Spring Volunteer Fire Department was officially incorporated in 1918, this armory was purchased by the volunteers to house their first fire truck.
Firefighters that were actually part of the initial bucket brigade actually put up their own credit in order to raise the $5,500 necessary to actually purchase the building from the state. And then they held minstrel shows up until 1927, and that actually went and helped to pay off the bank loan that they had.
Over the years, the department made changes to the building to accommodate expanding equipment.
Later on in the 20s, they purchased 2 more engines, and they needed an easy way of accessing the building. So they actually changed the front facade, the castle-like structure that we saw in the early pictures, and they changed it and added a gable to it. That allowed them to add a second entrance to the building, and it made it easier for fire trucks to move in and out of the building.
In 1950, a third bay door was added, and it was this facade that Jeremy worked to maintain. From the outside, it looks like the old fire station, featuring an engine similar to those that used to run out of here. Inside, one can see remnants of the old station. These are the original tiles still hanging on the wall. And this window frame, now a decoration, used to have a unique function.
You can see in the background a window that used to be in the building itself that people crawled through back in the day to get on some of the equipment in the engine room. And then that window stood outside for years, and we had it restored and put up on the wall.
While these 1910 timbers weren't visible in the original building, once they were uncovered, extra effort was made to keep them exposed.
I was able to put a new roof on the building and insulate from the top down as opposed to covering the timber back up. And that is just a wonderful element that's in the building that everyone comments on when they come in and how beautiful it is.
Another feature found in most fire stations from this era became a functional element for the restaurant.
The pizza oven is in the hose tower. So the hose tower itself was a place to dry the hoses after calls. But I saw that as a great place to put a pizza oven. So the pizza oven is still drying things, dough, and making fresh pizza. It provides for a really cool element.
Everywhere you look are reminders of this building's past, and these historic photographs of firefighting in Silver Spring really emphasize the connection.
Some of these pictures date back into the 1950s, and these people stop by today, and we always have them sign their picture.
As if on cue, Pat Dillon stopped in the restaurant to look at his father's photograph hanging on the wall.
He was Matt Dillon, actually he called him Mickey, and he was deputy chief at the Silver Spring Fire Department here for like 12, 15 years.
Turns out, Pat's picture is also on the wall. He was a junior firefighter along with his brother Rick. Everyone who stops in like this has a story to tell. Mike says one in particular stands out in his mind.
One day during construction, a woman had stopped by with some friends of hers, and they had balloons, and it was her birthday, and she was taking pictures out in front of the firehouse, and we thought it meant something to her, so we went out and asked, why they were taking pictures out in front of the firehouse. And she said, years ago, my mom was going to deliver her, and she was on her way to the hospital but couldn't make it. And she got as far as the fire department, and the fireman actually delivered her right here in the fire station.
Fire Station 1 was more than just a place to dispatch fire engines. It was a place where the community came together.
In the early days, people would come here on Fridays and Saturday nights to eat. They would have a big family dinner. People from the town and friends and what have you would get here. This is where you went on Friday and Saturday night. You'd have dances here. If there was a government organization meeting that was taking place, it took place here in this building.
Today that spirit lives on in this restaurant that bears the fire station's name. And besides being a great place to get a meal or have a party, the tradition of helping to save lives continues.
We still are offering healthcare training, CPR training and first aid training, and advanced healthcare training for physicians, nurses, paramedics, and other allied health professionals through Rescue One Training for Life, which is a company that does training. So we're able to continue giving back to the community through providing healthcare training in this facility.
For both Mike and Jeremy, this is more than just a job. Both have been connected to firefighting nearly all their lives. It was a labor of love transforming this building so that it could live on into the next century.
Being able to reuse something that's been here instead of tearing it down and building a new structure, I think it means a lot to the community. And this building meant a lot to the community, so to actually see it saved and changed over and transformed into this restaurant was something that was not only a challenge, but it was such a great adventure.
This is my first job as a full-time firefighter paramedic, and my career with Montgomery County and Silver Spring. So it was a great place for me starting out as a young person because it was a new chapter in my life working here. So it's given me a great feeling that I've been able to save the building and see what it's turned into and enjoy what it has to offer.
December 31, 2010 was the end of an era. One of the last remaining 19th century general stores closed its doors forever. Officially called the Seneca Store, it served area farmers, residents, and travelers since it was constructed in 1901. The most recent proprietors, Raymond and Billy Poole, decided that after operating it for 45 years, it was time to close it down. To say goodbye, let's watch the interview we did with Raymond Poole 10 years ago. Stepping into Poole's General Store is like stepping back in time. Located off River Road in Seneca, the store was built in 1901 by Frederick Allnut. Back then it sat near a mill and up the hill from the C&O Canal. The Poole family has been operating this store since 1965. Raymond Poole first began working here in 1948 when the Allnuts still owned the store.
We were the only local store within 3 miles, and we sold anything that you need, really. I mean, from hardware up to feed or groceries. And we had not a complete line, but we had something of everything, put that way. And the farmers would come in, and then we had the post office here. Everybody would come in every day and pick the mail up, and they would get a loaf of bread or a quart of milk or something like that.
The store offered more than a place to buy necessities. It also drew people together.
I mean, it used to be every night we didn't close up till 10, 11 o'clock, and they played cards down the store. And of course, one played cards, didn't buy enough to pay the electric bill, but they played cards about 4 nights out of 6, that type of thing. It was 6 to 8 of them would be playing cards, and 10 more would be standing around watching it and talking, that kind of stuff. I mean, it was sort of a gathering spot, and it wasn't too many gathering spots around at that time.
Today, Poole's General Store is still a place where you can find good service and good conversation. The bulk of their business is horse feed, but they still carry food, hardware, and other dry goods. Something else? Since 1972, the county's Department of Parks has owned the property, leasing it back to the Poole family. Registered as a historic site, the building will be preserved. The Parks Department is currently seeking a new tenant and recently held an open house to stir up interest.
We're having an open house today at the Poole Store so local citizens can come out and voice their thoughts and concerns about the future use of this property.
What we would really like to do is have a place for all the local farmers to come and sell their produce. One thing I think that's really growing in the community is all these local farms that are producing, and people want to buy locally. And so one of the ideas that we're kind of mulling over is bringing all the farms together, bringing the Lewis Orchard, the Butler's Orchard, the Homestead Farms, and all these farms that have produce that are selling, and people that want to buy locally fill these shelves up with local food, the local stores that they can grow, and that they have a place for them to sell.
Well, one of the folks said to me, he says, it's just a shame that it's not still open, and I agree with him. I think it's as soon as we can get this store back the way people remember it, will be a good thing for the community.
For updates and more information on Poole's store, visit the Parks website at www.montgomeryparks.org. So, how did you do on our history quiz? We asked, what did this 19th century brown glass bottle contain? Well, we know that it must have held something poisonous because of these distinctive ridges found on both sides. They signaled danger, even if you couldn't read the bottle's warning, much like our Mr. Yuck stickers of today. Well, that's all the time we have for this show. If you have comments for us or ideas for future shows, send an email to paths-present@verizon.net. Be sure to tune in again next time as we follow more paths to the present.